Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the CleanTech Lithium PLC investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged. They can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab that's just situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Please just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company can review all questions submitted today and will publish those responses where it is appropriate to do so. Before we begin, as usual, we would just like to submit the following poll, and if you could give that your kind attention, I'm sure the company would be most grateful. And I would now like to hand you over to the team from CleanTech Lithium. Steve, good afternoon, sir.
Hi, good evening, everybody. We are expecting Dan Fox-Davis to join us, but he's in South Africa having a few connection problems, and he will join, I think, within a few minutes. But if we get going, the purpose of this webinar is just to give an update on operational things that we've been doing over the course of the last month. First of all, if we start looking at the market, it's been very interesting. Now, clearly, the lithium price has been languishing around the $10,000 a ton. There's been a slowdown in EV take up in the EU. Clearly, there's still good take up in the United States and tremendous take up in China and elsewhere. This is a graph. This is BYW's sales. They're continuing to grow very, very strongly in China and also exporting around the world. As far as the perception of the lithium market goes, I think most people have been calling the bottom for the last few months, and particularly when Rio Tinto launched its bid for Arcadium, everybody took that as a sign the bottom is reached. Rio Tinto is renowned for trying to get assets at the bottom of the market. So we believe we're round about there. We're starting to see production coming out. We saw Pilbara mothball some production and suspend expansions. We expect that to continue and gradually to see a consolidation of the lithium price going forward. And certainly by the time we intend to come into production, we've slated for end of 2027, we believe that prices would have regained closer to their long-term incentive price. Where we've been busy in Chile is progressing with the pre-feasibility study. Now we're working with Worley is leading that, and Lanshen is the technology provider on the process. We've explained, I think, in a previous webinar that we're splitting the plant between having the DLE and the concentration process up at the project site at Laguna Verde and transporting a lithium chloride eluate down to Copiapó to a conversion plant where that will be converted to battery-grade lithium carbonate. One reason was trying to pull as much of the numbers of people and processes from working at the 4,300 meter altitude down to a lower level. But it also provides a carbonation plant which can be expanded in the future to handle material from our second project, Viento Andino, which will happen shortly after Laguna Verde. We have selected a site just on the outskirts of Copiapó. It's on the main highway down from Laguna Verde. It bypasses the center of Copiapó, so there's no need for traffic through Copiapó. It go to the site and then product onto the port at Caldera. One of the things that's really been taking off in the course of the last year is electrification of vehicles. This is happening in the large scale truck fleet as well. We're seeing quite a number of models coming out of China, certainly looking at it in the United States as well, of having trucks with long range on batteries. Now, clearly we are 350 kilometers between Copiapó and the mine site. And if we can get a truck with the capacity to get up there and use regeneration during braking on the trip down from high altitude to low altitude, we then have a shuttle-free, a shuttling electric vehicle going backwards and forwards. That has a number of benefits. Clearly no tailpipe emissions, low noise. As we go through the few small communities of indigenous people lower in the area. The other area we've been talking about is power. Clearly Chile has got a great interconnected grid, which is now 65% renewable. We've been using our baseline source of power is to put a transmission line to a substation and connect into that grid and have a power purchase agreement with 100% renewable energy. But this is the highest irradiance zone in the world, right where we are at Laguna Verde, perfect for solar energy. So we have been looking at the potential to have self-generated renewable energy at site. We've been employing a consultant, actually a company called Clean Power Hunter, and experts in this area. And they've come up with their proposal, what makes the most sense in terms of providing renewable energy 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, recognizing that in winter there is less sunshine, but there is steady wind up at the mine site. And they propose a combination of solar and wind connected to battery energy storage could provide 100% renewable energy self-generated on site at what they believe is a capex and opex very competitive to connecting into the grid. So we'll be looking at both those alternatives in the pre-feasibility study. The aim is to be able to operate our plant on 100% renewable energy. As far as the exploration program, we signaled earlier in the year we intended to do a 5-hole program. We completed 2 holes and pumping tests before the winter set in early, and that stopped work for quite a number of months. We issued the results of those 2 drill holes, again demonstrating that we've got decent lithium grades. We do want to do additional holes to the west when we have funds from either the ASX raise or from other sources at the beginning of next year. In terms of the work we're doing with the resources and translation into reserves, we're working with Montgomery, a well-known hydrogeological consultancy company, done a lot of work throughout Latin America. They are preparing or have prepared a very robust hydrogeological model. And as part of the pre-feasibility study, they're using all of the data that we've had in the drilling over the last few years, plus all the pump tests and all the lithological studies and permeability studies. And they will be designing the extraction well field and the re-injection well field, positioning the wells, the size of the wells, the pumping rate for the wells to provide the feed to the DLE plant. And the design of the extraction and re-injection is to be done in such a way that there will be no impact on surface water features, in particular the laguna there. So the purpose that we have is to guarantee in the environmental impact assessments that we do not impact the surface water features. So that work is going to be completed to the end, towards the end of this year, and feeding into the pre-feasibility study. Now, because of this work ongoing, and because of the split in the plant between up at the mine site and Copiapó, we had to change the engineering to split it, and there's now infrastructure requirements at both sites. With the work coming out of Lanshen, that process engineering work is being done in China. That took a little bit longer, and the reality is that we've now received all of that engineering. Worley is consolidating that, but the timetable for the PFS is going to slip from the end of this year into the first quarter next year. But the objective is to make sure that the the PFS is robust, that we have very good data on CapEx and OpEx, to be able to talk substantively to potential strategic investors that we're looking to see coming into the project. We have a pilot plant has been working in Copiapó, producing very good quality concentrated eluate 2,200 ppm lithium. We've transported 4 containers loads to the second half of the pilot plant, which is owned by Conductive Energy. It's in Chicago. That has all been set up. We put results out the previous month to show that we've made battery grade material at small scale in the setup. We now have all the facilities. We're using a forward osmosis unit to concentrate the solution up to the 20,000 ppm before we remove the final traces of impurities, the calcium, magnesium, boron, to create a very pure lithium chloride solution, which we then carbonate and produce the battery grade lithium carbonate. This is now operational. We are feeding material into the plant, and during the course of November we'll start producing lithium carbonate, get that analyzed as battery grade, and the aim is to produce up to a ton of lithium carbonate initially, to provide samples to prospective off-takers and strategic investors to start their product qualification process. And during the course of this month, we'll make sure there are photographs going into the media of how this work is ongoing, and the first crystals being produced, and then we'll have the final large quantities by the end of November. So this is a process going on throughout November. And what we expect to be coming next, clearly the battery grade lithium carbonate ready to send to the strategic investors and off-takers. I've explained in the past, most of them, they want to start off testing the chemical composition, so they want kilos of material. Then they look at the physical characteristics of the precipitate and want tens of kilos. And if all that is okay, they want to put it into their test cells, and they will require hundreds of kilos. So we have more than enough material now to kick off this process with multiple off-takers and strategic investors. And as people want more and more material, then we can reactivate the pilot plant in Chile, in Copiapó, and produce as much material as off-takers require for their testing. We have been engaged with a number of potential strategic investors over the course of the last couple of years. And as we get closer and closer towards producing battery grade material from our pilot plant, closer to the completion of the PFS, and closer to line of sight on the operating contract, the sale, we are eliciting more and more interest from some very, very serious players who have certainly reactivated their due diligence on the company and the technical work which we are doing. And we have back and forth with a number of these potential strategic investors. And certainly on that side, on the sale, it was very good to see that the government, in reviewing all the expressions of interest for partaking in lithium production on these salars open to the private sector, they selected 6, including our Laguna Verde project, as prioritized as having the best potential for development. And clearly Laguna Verde is the one that's far in advance of any of the other 5 projects, which haven't really even started exploration stage yet. We will be working with government. We had a notification which was published yesterday, which is on the process forward and the conditions for a company to be able to go into a streamlined process with no direct negotiations with government on the terms of the operating contract. And we believe that by the end of the year, when we are required to file our application for a CL, we will be able to demonstrate that we meet the criteria and then go into a direct negotiation with government. In parallel with this going on, the government has started the process of dialogue with communities. Clearly, they want to ensure that communities are supportive, of the projects. We started that dialogue a couple of years ago, and I think we've demonstrated in signing the alliance agreement with our communities and seeing, the president of the community standing up in public in Chile, talking about how they see CleanTech Lithium's approach to producing lithium in Chile using direct lithium extraction with reinjection of the brine as having the least potential environmental impact, and they are totally supportive. And they do that both in public and in private with the government as well. So that process is ongoing. We've talked about the sale for the Laguna Verde project. The government has said that by the end of this year, they will make an announcement on the next batch of salars, which they'll be seeking to start processing sale applications. We do have additional expressions of interest we put in for our Viento Andino project and the Arenas Blancas project and another. And we will expect to hear from government on those by the end of this year as well. Many people have asked what's going on with the CEO. Since Aldo left in April, I've been the interim CEO, but we have had a search process in progress. Used a company in Australia. We had quite a long list of very good candidates. We shortlisted 4. I met with our resident director Australia, Tommy McKeith. We met the leading 4 candidates. We introduced the final one to the board, who all approve. We have now finalized the contracts, and clearly to become a director of an AIM-listed company, an ASX, the individual's going through the third party process and doing all the normal checks you need to do before being appointed as a director. And we expect to be making an announcement very, very shortly on our CEO, which I'm very happy is coming aboard. Very experienced, not just in mining, but in project development, operations, and executing projects in Latin America. And clearly a fluent Spanish speaker too. The final thing people keep on asking is, where are we with the ASX? We've mentioned delays with the ASX process. There was one last issue that was outstanding between AIM and ASX. I can tell you that has now been resolved. So we will be clear to go ahead with an ASX listing when we believe that the time is right. We mentioned with the delay, we had to look at refreshing our prospectus and updating it with the interim financials. That's being done. We'll be finalizing that new prospectus, which will be a pathfinder in the next 1 or 2 weeks. And looking at the market and the timing in Australia, taking a call, is it the right time now to go to the ASX listing, or with Christmas coming up and the new year, and with us having a lot of additional new information coming along in the next few months, whether that's better to delay that into the new year. We haven't taken a decision. We're still sounding out with our brokers, what is going to be the best timing to do this ASX listing. But as far as the regulatory issues, that has all now been resolved. So I think that's a general update with where we are. I'm very happy. Dan is now joined. Do you want to add any further comments there, Dan, on the ASX process or the market?
Yes, Steve, just to check, can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. Sorry to everybody. I was listening through, but I'm in Cape Town for an energy conference, and we had a few technical issues on bandwidth on the webcam. No, Steve, I think you did a very good job. We could launch in, and I think maybe some of the questions will come out, and from the questions, they're obviously around a number of the topics that you touched on, and then maybe I can clarify some things from my side and from my role as we go through them.
Okay, so
with that, well, I was going to say, should I? I'll read through them and then I can address some as we go out, and we've got that one.
Please do.
But we had some questions there because there's a couple of them that sort of go together. So there was a question around, I think I missed that early on as I was talking about systems issues, on the share consolidation being sufficient for the listing at the 24 or into 25. First one is I can ask you, yes, so the consolidation will be sufficient. The question we just have at the moment is the Australian market tends, we're going to the Australian summer. The Australian market tends to shut down at the end of the first or second week of December, and then largely doesn't come back until mid-January. So obviously the company's joint broker is Canaccord. They have a large operation in Australia, and we're just making discussions about whether the timing makes both sense. Obviously, everybody wants it to have the best possible footing to be the widest success for the market and for the retail, which was the intent. And so there's a question of whether there is going to be a view towards sentiment and whether it's better to try and get it away just before the Christmas break or their summer break, or whether it's better to come back just after Christmas in the new year. The regulatory process is now resolved. It was just paperwork and admin and dealing with two exchanges. I know on the chat rooms, a couple of people have said whether they've asked questions whether the ASX was going slow or trying to protect their market. The ASX wants as many companies as possible. They've been extremely helpful through the process. Many of the other companies there have assets in other countries. There was a question in one of the chat rooms about whether the ASX was being less supportive because it was a non-Australian asset, but you have companies like Lake and Vulcan and all sorts of others. So the ASX wants to see as many people as on the market as possible. They've been very helpful and encouraging. It was just a very technical administrative issue, which was a pain, but we have now resolved. So the question is now just on timing. Obviously, the market's been a little bit weak in the UK over the last 2 weeks. And as Steve says, Steve and I were having a catch-up call this morning. There's a number of operational updates coming up. We'd like to be showing that we have the lithium, and indeed the new CEO, which Steve just alluded to, hopefully very imminently. And the question is whether getting him under his feet under the table, as he's quite well known in Australia, and whether that would also assist then in terms of getting the maximum benefit from the ASX listing. Steve, is there anything else you want to add on that?
No, that covers it. No, the share consolidation.
Okay.
We're looking for approval from shareholders at the AGM on the 26th of November.
So, Steve, there's a number one. I'll try and scan through this if I can consolidate some of them. The ASX raise, the minimum is 200 investors. Well, we can get away with 150 because of our existing ones at 200 at 5,000 packages. So we need to raise sort of minimum between $500,000 to $1 million Aussie. Obviously, there's no things that the company wants to do. It's very much going to be dependent on the price at the time. At these levels, I think the company would look to try and minimize the amount that one's raising. If the market was to get stronger towards lithium, then we'll review. So there's no set market from that. We don't have to set the price advance. Last time, due to some, again, technical issues, we had to go out and lodge the prospectus. This time we'll be running a Pathfinder. So effectively what that means is we market on the back of the Pathfinder, which is basically a draft prospectus. And so investors, you won't see anything or see any announcement until it's announced that it's being done, it's closed. So there won't be that pre-lodgement, and there won't be the necessity to set the price. So when we are ready to go, then effectively Steve and myself and the new CEO working with our other brokers go around and solicit interest. We'll have a clearing, and then we make a decision of how we want to do, and then the announcement will be put in and the lodgement. But the lodgement, it will then be actually done and completed. So there's no risk of it not going through at that point in time. So that goes off on the raise for the questions. Steve, do you want to touch on the cost reduction measures?
Yeah, no. Clearly, we're always conscious, that we want to minimize, administration, costs. We've had a very active, operational program this year. We've come to the end of the field work we were doing in drilling, and the operation of the pilot plant in Chile. We want to now complete the pre-feasibility study, and we won't restart that field work until we have clearly the funds to do that. So unfortunately, the operational team in the resource development and the pilot plant work we've had to terminate. We're very sad to do that. They've been very supportive of the company, but the reality is we cannot keep people in a junior company if we don't have full-time work for them. That was all done very amicably. We've had very good discussions with all of our consultants. So we've removed everybody from retainers. Some have volunteered to continue work without invoicing. Others will be on an hourly basis. We have closed or are closing some of our facilities in terms of office facilities in Chile, using shared office space. Obviously, we can't come back on all the legal expenses of having nomads and brokers and company secretaries, but we are working very hard to reduce all administration expenses, as well as keeping only the people that are active on our current programs.
Okay, great. So I'm trying to scroll through some of the questions here, some of which I'm going to sort of several parties asking very similar questions. So we'll try and consolidate them into sort of general themes. So there's a question about whether the strategic investors under the NDA are backing off in the present lithium market. I mean, Steve, from our sort of conversations, is that there is a general consensus that there is a requirement for lithium. The lithium demand outstrips supply, particularly if you go forward about 2 or 3 years. And so most of the major strategics are acutely aware that they need to source further lithium supplies. Now, what that pricing will be is very much depending on the market, but it doesn't change the overall fundamentals of the need and demand for lithium, or for a number of companies to have security of lithium supply. And so you're seeing that with the deals that Rio did, and there's some other smaller deals that were announced over the last couple of weeks. So I don't think it's a question of whether people are backing off, Steve. I don't know whether your views there. It's just a question at which, and the sort of strategic partners really come in to fund a project. And as long as the project's economics are robust, and we're very fortunate to be very low down the cost curve in terms of where we would sit, where we go into production, that the project economics remain robust, even if we are at 10, 12, or 15 and 20 is much, much better. And so we're looking at a longer term price of over 20. But if you were to stay at the current markets, this is still a very profitable project in terms of the cash flows that it generates. But Steve, you have any thoughts or comments around that?
Yeah, no, I think all the strategics we've talked to over the course of the last year or so, the two things they want to see is the operating contract, the sale, and now we're showing them a direct line of sight. Now here we have a prioritized project, and we believe we can get into the position of getting into direct negotiations with government without having to go through a tender process, and that's piqued the interest of strategics. And clearly, as we're closing in on completion of the PFS and can start sharing information under NDA with strategics, they're getting more and more interested. So I say we have a few very serious discussions ongoing at the moment.
Couple of question there. Similar one, sorry, back in from Toby. Some of the pre-submitted, I'm not sure who addressed them, but question about whether debt financing is still an option on the DFS. Toby, the equity markets are affected, but the debt finance is going to be purely down to the project economics. And at 10,000, the project is still extremely robust when you've got a sort of $4,500 cost base. If at 10, it's by most project standards extremely good. The sentiment issue is the overall lithium market and the fact that a lot of investors made a lot of money on other lithium companies and taken profits throughout this year, which has sort of depressed the whole sector. And then you've also seen cash now being sort of siphoned off into various sort of gold plays, is taking it away from some of the lithium markets. So while you've got a short-term equity market depression, the fundamentals for projects will do very well. So if you were something like company that Steve and I were formerly with European Lithium, I think, Steve, their break-even price on like 27 or something. Something
no,
absurdly high.
They're about 18,000.
So you know, if you're European Lithium, then yeah, you're probably going to have a problem in doing debt financing. With respect to where our break-even point is and the current market, you'd still be attracting significant vendors and parties in terms of doing debt, but also most of the debt is likely to come from strategic partners who have a material interest in wanting to put the project into production. So, and to be honest, where we are after the DFS is some time away. I really don't think that would be something to concern at this point in time. Steve, I'm just going to add this question here from Colin V. The question was, it might seem a strange question given the lithium focuses on the battery technology, but given your review of HGV transport from site to processing to the on-site 24/7 green power on-site, have you looked at green hydrogen generated on-site as an option which could be complementary? I don't know much about green hydrogen, but I don't think we have any hydrogen, do we?
No, we haven't looked at green hydrogen on site. But Chile is very much looking at green hydrogen production. They're looking at tremendous investments. Now, clearly, that could be used for transportation in the future. So whether you get hydrogen trucks or electric trucks, whatever works the best, and having no tailpipe emissions will be good.
Steve, a couple ones there. So I was just sorting out my system side, but yeah, so we just a couple of people asking about the CEO again. So just to clarify, you've identified somebody. We've made an offer. They've accepted. The process is on the AIM market. You need to go to your Nomad, and they need to review and do background checks and get approvals. And then on the ASX, which we want to preempt that there's no further issues, they also require police checks and good character references for, is it the last 10, every country of the last 10 years?
Every country you've resided in the last 10 years.
And from memory, I think our candidate has resided in 5 different countries, including 1 or 2 African countries, and therefore we're just going through the paperwork. But we hope to be able to update the market imminently. And as soon as we do, we'll most likely do another update webinar where we can introduce the new CEO to investors and to shareholders. So that I think would be certainly within, Steve, what do you reckon? The next, we're hoping probably in the next 2 weeks?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so guys, hopefully we'll have another one in the next 2 weeks' time, and we can use that to introduce the new CEO. I know everybody gets very frustrated on things and announcements, but with all these things, there is always so much administration and process these days when you are public companies. Joseph, you'd mentioned about the share price target. For 6, 12 months and 3 years. Obviously, the company runs their models. We're just going through an exercise where I'm rerunning a straight net present value based on the production runs that we're assuming to go in at 10, 12.5, 15, 17.5, and then back at 20. Those will do an updated research note over the next couple of weeks. Peter Rose is working on that, who's one of the technical team with Fox Davies. It's not really possible to do a 3 and 6 months. What you can really do is look at the net present value of the project that you expect to go into production. You can look at where the market is in terms of how much more confidence, the percentage of net present value you get when you go to your PFS and your DFS. You've got some variables in there about assuming at what price you're going to raise further equity to go into the equity part of the development funding, and to what the debt equity ratio would be. But I will hopefully get something out in the next 2 weeks. And what we're trying to do with Peter is I'm trying to get to doing some tables that is going to basically give some variables. So we're going to run it at 10, 12, 15. We'll make some assumptions about different timelines, whether we get bang on, or to be honest, with those mining projects, you do get some delays. So also what happens if we just shift out. So that'll get, and this is very much just a formula. So it's not a forecast. It's just these are the values that the project model will kick out, and we'll hopefully publish that in the next 2 weeks. Peter's just traveling on a site visit at the moment. He'll be back next week, and then it's going to go through our internal reviews, and then I hope to publish probably maybe a week on Monday is probably realistic for us. But you still end up with if you end up something around about the 12, 15, I think you end up at about around pound 20. If you end up going back up to the long-term forecast of about 20,000, which Benchmark are talking to go back over the next 2-3 years, you still end up significantly north of £2, depending on some of the assumptions in the model. I think the last one I was playing with came around at about 218. But again, that's all very much dependent on the lithium price, and getting through the problems, the process and the hurdles of getting into production on time. So and I don't know if the company's got any other figures, and I'll also find out whether Canaccord is going to do an updated note at any time. All right, sorry, I'm trying to consolidate. There's so many questions here, trying to consolidate them together. Andy B, sorry, going from the bottom up, share price reduced. I think, to be fair, there's been a lot of sell-off in the lithium market across the board. ARC Equities runs a model of, I think, 60. Steve, was it how many 60-something companies?
I think 67.
67. So, and about 2/3 of those have performed slightly worse than we've performed in the share price over this year, and 1/3 is above, but those third tend to be some of the larger ones that are a little bit closer to production. So we've been very much in the hands of the lithium price. Secondly, I think there's been a sell-off from the lithium sector into other things like gold. Fourthly, third even, I think everybody, all of us, were getting quite, have an anticipation for getting onto the market, onto the ASX. And obviously we are behind in terms of being able to show that we produced the first lithium carbonate, do some of the technical issues, and getting the kit in that was announced last week, which is now in, and as Steve says, it is being processed as we speak. So I think that's led to a little bit of investor waning. And in the lack of good positive news, you always tend to drift a little bit. So we're very much hoping that with the positive news coming through, we can start to address that. Steve and I were having a conversation this morning about getting back out in terms of IR, in terms of just reaching out to sort of other newer audiences because we are so incredibly cheap. And also going back to some of the original shareholders that came in who may have exited over the last 2-3 years. But really, to be honest, to answer your question there, it's mostly driven by the lithium price. And while we hope to get progressively good news out to the market, most of the audience that we have here are existing shareholders. So it's incumbent upon Steve and Gordon, myself and Nick to go out and tell the story to new investors and to show the relative value. And the share price will go up when we bring in more buyers and sellers. So our goal is to go and find new buyers and hopefully get some news out into the market that will convince those people who have been selling off slightly that the company still represents incredibly good value. So that's there. Hang on, it's a point which you won't pursue. Mars, there's no point at which we won't pursue the ASX. The costing and the legals and everything has been done. It's now been finished off. It's a question just of market timing and what makes most sense for the company. And that's a conversation between the company, with other brokers and myself. And also just a question of calendar. There's just not much point when the lithium market's been having a down week for the last 2 weeks to rush back to Australia and try and push it into a slightly sterile market, to be honest, and try and push just before Christmas. You get the reality is that people go away for it's their summer holiday, but people go away for the Christmas. Then they come back in the new year with a bit more optimism. People tend to, particularly on the institutional side, fund managers by early December are sort of reluctant to take on any further new positions. They want to close off their books and do their audits, etc. So I don't think there's a point at which we would not pursue the ASX. I'm looking at my diary as when it makes sense to get back down there, and whether that's to go down in 2 weeks and be down there for the end of November and early December, or whether it makes sense to go there just straight after Christmas. And we had that conversation not only this morning, but then also on Sunday with Canaccord Australia in terms of their feedback of all their various parties as to what the sentiment was like into Australia. Steve, can you outline an update the sale application process timeline for Laguna Verde?
Yeah, as I said, the application needs to go in by the end of December. The process is depending if there are multiple applications for a particular salar, the government's obliged to go to a public tender process. But as I explained earlier, if the company can demonstrate a number of things, one is its experience in the lithium business, its financial capacity to develop projects, and having 80% of the licenses in a defined polygon, then the company can go into a direct negotiation with government. Once the government agrees on that, the time frame which the government has put out to the public is 3 to 4 months for negotiation of the contract, drafting of the decree, and getting that signed by the president, because it is a contract between the state of Chile and the company.
Steve, so when we were actually talking about this evening, Greg J is asking, is any impact expected from the US election?
Well, that's going to be a very interesting one because a lot of people were saying, oh, Donald Trump gets elected, he's not so enthusiastic about electric vehicles. He may scrap the IRA or water it down. But meanwhile, at his shoulder, he's got Elon Musk, who's the strongest proponent for electrification of vehicles, and he's definitely got the ear of President Trump. Which way it goes, we don't know. The reality is the world is going electric on vehicles. The world recognizes it needs to reduce its carbon footprint. That's irreversible, whether it's Trump or Harris who's involved. The rest of the world is going electric.
It's going to be an interesting 24-hour. Well, whether we get an announcement in 24 hours is another question. I'm sure it'll probably end up being on a knife edge and down to a few recounts. So it could be a couple of days. But anyway, it's going to be an interesting day or so going ahead. Right, trying to consolidate some of these into together. Back here with Peter. Steve, the PFS timeline keeps moving to the left. We're aware that we have more aggressively. Do we still have a BFS, DFS? I think they just mean, bankable feasibility, it's effectively the same thing. Is strategic partner likely to invest substantial funds, and when do you expect the BFS to be ready? So, Steve, if we sort of condense that down, one is obviously after we had the sale announcement, we had a lot of interest inbound to the company about people wanting to get involved. There's some clarity there. So there are no shortage of examples one can point to of companies getting involved before a DFS. You wouldn't necessarily, we want to do the DFS before we enter into strategic offtake agreements, but in terms of bringing a strategic partner, the two are not necessarily combined or codependent. But Steve, do you want to just touch on where we are, what's still going into the PFS? I know we've got a hard stop in 12 minutes, but what's going into the PFS? And then obviously as the PFS has expanded in scope, what the timeline would be from the PFS to the DFS now?
Yeah, well, the key things going into the PFS is the work from Montgomery is with their understanding of the hydrogeology, its determination of what is the maximum sustainable production rate from the aquifer, so that we do not impact the surface water features. It's, I say, the design of the well fields for both extraction and re-injection, and the capital costs and the operating costs for all of that. The process engineering has all been supplied from Lanshen. They've already started delivering operating cost information, and capital cost information is following very, very shortly. The way they would like to work in China is not just to do the process engineering, but to propose an EPC package. So they will be proposing a capital cost to do the fabrication and direction of the plant. And then Worley are doing all the infrastructure requirements, which is the power, the water connections, the infrastructure down in Copiapó as well. We'll be updating all of the work we've done with Benchmark on the markets, looking at product. Clearly we're going to be making lithium carbonate, but to make lithium carbonate, we first of all make lithium chloride solution and then carbonate that. But again, what's been happening in the market, there's this shift towards solid state batteries, and solid state batteries require lithium chloride. And so we do have the potential in the future, if the market for solid state batteries increases, to make lithium chloride as well as lithium carbonate. So all these things are being addressed in the pre-feasibility study. Then with the good information on capex and opex, it'll be the economic performance of the project. Now, once we do
Okay, thank you.
So once we do a robust PFS, we then want to roll into the DFS, and clearly the more work you do at the PFS level, it can shorten the time frame for the DFS.
But realistically, Steve, I mean, when we complete the PFS, were you expecting it to be 6 months, 9 months, 3 months?
No,
I mean, I know that a lot of the work is
providing funding is available. We would expect to roll the PFS into completion of DFS by the end of 2025.
Okay, so 6 to 9 months between the PFS and the DFS if we come out. There's a couple of things here, see if I can answer there. So how do you fund the upcoming license payment? How does the ASX view? The parties on the license are very supportive of the company. They are very close to the company. They're taking a very long-term view. They want to go in, and under the terms of it, they would only ever get back past the license. We retain 51% at all times. The ASX, I think it's a non-issue from their point of view. It hasn't been ever raised or discussed. So the question about the reduced market cap in terms of the impact for the sale process. And Steve, correct me here if I'm wrong, but my understanding on all these ones and the projects that I've worked on the last 20 years is government is not looking for us to sit down there and say, we have X hundreds of millions for production. They're looking for a management team that's demonstrated financial capacity to bring in partners and to fund projects. And that's where Steve's a great help, having been involved with both Escondida and Collahuasi, the world's largest and second largest copper projects in the world, both of which they took into production in Chile. They're looking for demonstration that you've got a potential on partners. You don't necessarily have to have defined the exact partner, but if we have letters of intent or interest from a number of parties, then that suffices. And then we do have people like the German investment bank that came down and gave us a draft term sheet in funding up to, I think it was either 75% or 80%, Steve, of a potential offtake contract. So that's what they're looking for demonstration. So you broke up there slightly, Steve. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I'd say that is 25% of the contract value can be financed by KfW.
25% of the contract value, which was an amount of.
That was $350 million on their proposed 8,000 tons a year.
Obviously, at a much higher price, but it's still significant. So what you need to demonstrate there is a route to financing, rather than, you don't need to necessarily. Most mining projects start with juniors and then get taken out. And when you're going through that process, they are not expecting you to sit there and show that you've got hundreds of millions of dollars on the balance sheet. What they'll be looking for is to show that you have a route and a plan to achieve that through the process, which we have. So future schedule, in terms of effectively, until we go into production, we are a non-revenue generating company. So there is a requirement to go onto the ASX. There'll be a funding around that. And then there'll be when you go into the development, there'll be a certain amount of debt and there'll be a certain amount of equity. That equity may be through the public markets. It might be at a project level from a strategic partner. The debt could be project finance at a project level. It may be that the company takes on some debt at a top co level based on the cash flows it expects to generate. So there's no really to sort of set out. Our focus for the moment is to focus on the lithium carbonate out of Chicago. It seems it's the 18th of November. We're doing a presentation to
19th of November.
19th of November. So just to clarify, so what's happening on the 19th in Chicago?
What we want to do there, we'll have the CEOs of our two companies we're working with, which is Conductive Energy and Forward Water, and we're looking at inviting a number of Detroit-based OEMs interested in potential purchasing of lithium carbonate from CleanTech Lithium, so that we can talk through what we are doing in Chile, how we have an FTA agreement, and we can provide this wonderful battery-grade lithium carbonate you can see out of the back end of the process.
Steve, just for those that don't, so just want to clarify, OEMs can cover, so original equipment manufacturer, but you just want to broaden us to the type of companies that are being invited on the 19th?
The car manufacturers who are interested in lithium carbonate supply for the LFP batteries going into their electric vehicles.
Okay, so we've got that one on Rossa C. Thank you very much for your question. Okay, that's so Martin saying it looks possibly very cheap. I agree with you. The other one is also, guys, it's that we used to do a lot more marketing and going out. And then the problem is you can't, when we were running up to the ASX and there's a proposal raising on that side of the ASX, you're sort of constricted from going out and banging the drum and trying to seek new investors to buy on the secondary market if the company knows and we know that we were heading towards the ASX. So if we go for January, then I can in good conscience go out and start to go out to other people and say, look, we think we're cheap, we have this news flow, all of which stuff is very true. And we can try and then to encourage more buying on market. You're very much restricted as a broker and from the company in terms of the summer when we were trying to get through all the process and administrative and legal hurdles from going out and doing a lot of marketing for the story. When you're gearing up to do an ASX listing, it's just not appropriate to try and be trying to get someone to buy on market on the Monday, knowing that on the Tuesday you're going to be going out and listing for the ASX. So that's also, I think, sort of limited us. We did very, very well, and I think actually the Steve and Gordon and Aldo, to give him his due, were all very effective in telling the story, and we need to get back to that. One of the problems we have here is it's good to update, but everybody here on the call is predominantly, including myself, significant shareholders, and there's a limit to how much further we can all buy. So the main thing I think also for the company is we are several hundred, I think, retail investors on, and probably that's half a dozen funds, but there's another 60 odd funds who we've spoken to who've looked at it from time to time, and there's a lot more retail investors to go and talk to. So not only in the UK, but obviously once we get on the ASX and there's a much broader retail base there. But in the meantime, there are a lot of retail investors in the UK and in Europe and other institutions that I need to get back to. And again, that's partly caveated by getting the feedback from Australia as to whether it makes sense to go out just before Christmas or whether it makes sense to come out just after the new year. But I think from people's questions here, you could take it as either we're trying to get away before Christmas if the sentiment is there on the lithium price, or we'll be back out in Australia just after the Christmas break. It will be one of the two, but certainly by the end of January, at the very latest, we would have to go on the ASX, and that's what I'm working to, and that's what I'm planning for my diary and my other commitments. Andy B. Company value dilution based on the ASX issue price. Again, just there's a question about pricing on models. What I'll probably do is we'll make some assumptions. So we'll do some tables about some equity raises at different amounts at different prices. One of the caveats you have is that in the model, at the moment, we assume that you put both into production at the same time. In another version of the model, we assume that we fund Laguna Verde and then Laguna Verde provides some cash flow to bring the second project in a year later. If you keep the price down at current markets and take that out for 5 years, then you'd probably end up having to raise further amount of debt to go into the second project. So there's a lot of scenarios based really just around where the lithium price is, because the lithium price would, I think, impact on the company's decisions about how they broaden projects. Right. Quick, I know we've already got, Steve, you got to go in 1 minute, but questions about would the Chilean government allow solar and wind power in the area? Do you want to quick talk to, because obviously they've got a huge amount of renewable energy already in the country.
Yes, and solar in particular, and wind has a preferential status. The government is encouraging that. There's a lot of solar farms in the north of Chile, and depending on the size of the installation, they can be installed only with an environmental impact statement rather than a full environmental impact assessment. So the government is trying to encourage the faster installation of solar, whereas putting in a transmission line does require the full scale environmental baseline studies plus environmental impact assessments, which can be lengthy. So rather than saying it's more difficult to put in solar, it's easier to put in solar.
Steve, I'm sorry, we had so many. I've been jumping through. I've missed a whole bunch from Miss Charlotte B. We've got here. We'll try. Steve, have you got 2 minutes, or do you need to jump?
A quick 2 minutes.
Okay, so the quick ones there about the drilling. Will that impact on the current resource? My understanding is it won't impact on the current resource numbers, but do you just know the presence and average core porosity in LV7? Charlotte, actually, some of your questions are quite technical into around the drilling program and things there, and they probably take a good 15-20 minutes. I'm afraid Steve has to go to a flight. Can I invite you? My email is up.
Those details are in the RNS.
Okay, but there's some wider questions. But can I encourage you to either reach out to Nick at CleanTech Lithium or directly to myself, and I'm very happy to either get back to work with the company to either get you back responses in writing, or we could arrange for a very quick call to address those. I just think they're going to take a good 15-20 minutes, and I'm afraid we don't have the capacity at the moment there. But last but not least, Steve, one important one the company have asked is for what was Francisco Basin, and we've now changed the name, and I can never remember it. My apologies.
Viento Andino.
Putting in. Yes, well, I can never remember. I just can't pronounce it properly, and I get embarrassed. So, putting in the CL application. Where are we with the CL application for our other core asset?
We put in the expressions of interest earlier this year. There were, I say, the government had 88 expressions of interest across 16 salars. They didn't say how many, for each particular one. Out of those 88, out of those 16 salars, they prioritized 6, one being Laguna Verde, and there'll be another announcement by the end of this year of their approach to the other salars. So we would expect to hear by the end of this year the status of our other applications. But our main priority now is to push ahead with Laguna Verde.
I'm very cognizant your time. So thank you everybody for joining. We will do another one in 2 weeks' time. At that point, we hope to introduce the company's new CEO. So what are we down? The 5th, that's the 12th there. So as we're inviting a whole bunch of car manufacturers to come and see lithium being produced on the 19th, one could assume from that we will hopefully be having an announcement before the 19th that we are now producing, with pictures and photographs and live graphics on the operational side there of actually producing our lithium, which I think will be a considerable hurdle. And we are very cognizant that we are somewhat behind. We'd hope to be doing that at the beginning of the year. So that'll show that it all works. That process it's running through right now as we speak. On the CEO, he will hopefully be joining us on that call in 2 weeks, subject to just getting the background checks all done. On the ASX, we are still very much committed to it. Just a question of looking at where the market sentiment is, and it's a question of getting advice whether we go in by year end or just first thing in the new year. There's a lot of questions around that. If you've got further questions, Charlotte, please get in touch. And otherwise, we'll get a research updated note some point in the next sort of 2 weeks or so. I think that's sort of the general broad brush. And Steve, should we? Yeah, let's put out one and maybe go for something in 2 weeks from today.
Great. Okay, thanks for participating, everybody.
Perfect. Thank you all.
Okay,
and,
again, sorry I was late into it. Many thanks.
Steve, Daniel, that's great. And thank you once again for updating investors this afternoon. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can really better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of CleanTech Lithium PLC, we would like to thank you for attending today's presentation, and good evening to you all.